Hi, everyone. Thank you for sticking around. We appreciate it. We're delighted to be here. What we're going to do is, Emilie and I have known each other for many years, and so this is really going to be kind of a fireside chat, so to speak. Yeah, without the fire, exactly. And we are, what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been working on for really the last 6 to 9 months of developing a social impact platform for Brooks Brothers. And so what we want to do is talk to you a little bit about what we mean here. So I'm thrilled to have heard the conversation today because we are absolutely shifting from a conversation around traditional cause marketing and really moving into purpose-driven societal impact, measurement, change, which is fantastic. And that's really what we want to focus on here. So when we're looking at a social impact platform, as we're developing these for brands, we're really looking at it from the standpoint of this is not about the nonprofits you support, and this is not about a traditional cause marketing campaign. This really is about putting a stake in the ground and telling your stakeholders where you stand, what you stand for, what are your core values, and what is your purpose? And that's really what we mean here. Now, there are going to be many, many different types of definitions. I always laugh when people ask for a definition of cause marketing because at this point, we could all just create our own. And much is the same when it comes to this whole social impact and purpose space, even what we call it. So is it CSR, is it social impact? There are many different terminology being used at this point. So this is where we're coming from, and we just wanted to kind of set the stage there of what we're looking at when we talk about a social impact platform. The keys here are measurable change and impact, and we want to make sure that we're doing that when we are developing these programs. The other thing that I think is critical, and you're going to hear this quite a bit from Emilie, is that this is an integrated effort when it comes to a brand. And so when brands are looking at this, unfortunately, we have many brands who still exist that this particular area sits over here to the side rather than being fully integrated into and embraced by the entire organization, and that it becomes a piece of the overarching marketing and positioning. It is not something that's added on, but rather it is something that becomes very organic, and it is part of the entire mix. That's the beauty of Emilie's position at Brooks Brothers, and you're going to hear more about that from her. So just a couple of quick things as we're diving in. First off, I know that we have a mix in the room of nonprofits. We have a few brands. We have a number of agency representatives like myself, which is fantastic. What I want you to make sure that you look at as we're walking through this is that if you're a brand, obviously, we're going to tell you the positives and the negatives and kind of some of the pain that we have experienced in this, and we are still in this process of building. If you're a nonprofit, we hope that this will really help you understand how a brand is looking at this, because whether we like it or not from a nonprofit standpoint, brands are moving into developing these platforms and developing these movements and this new way of thinking and looking at things. In many cases, brands are actually creating their own cause, so to speak. And so for a nonprofit, you have to really understand how do you approach and how are you going to fit into this new way of thinking. So real quick, as we look at a social impact platform, you'll see these are all of the different ways that it unites and integrates. So corporate philanthropy, your consumer activated programs, which could be considered our traditional cause marketing, sponsorship, your corporate social marketing efforts, employee engagement, which of course is critical, and then your socially responsible business practices. We will not get into that very much today, but that is a whole nother.
It could be a day long.
Yes, it could be a day long. So Brooks Brothers has been a fabulous brand when it comes to giving back, and particularly when it comes to more traditional cause marketing. Make-A-Wish Foundation of America and St. Jude Children's Research Hospital have been wonderful partners of theirs for many years. Fantastic in-store campaigns, wonderful employee engagement. So the brand has really stood behind their programs. But as Emilie and team were looking at what's next, that's when this exploration began. And so, Emilie, I'd love for you to tell us more about why. So, great cause marketing and great philanthropy in the past, but why move in this direction?
I think, well, what I said to you earlier was why not, and I think we've heard a lot in the groups, the previous two groups, I think that really strike home for us. But the why for us is the fact that we have been doing this for eons, actually. We're almost a 200-year-old company, and we were partners with the Red Cross when the Red Cross first came to be. So we've had a giving back sort of culture. But for the last, say, 14 years, we've been partners with Make-A-Wish, and it's 11 years this year for St. Jude. And it's been, as Phil mentioned, an organic journey. And what happens is once you become involved in cause and the evolution that cause marketing has had within brands over the course of the time that I've been involved over the last 11 years, it has been enormous. And so you start to ask yourselves, where do we go from here? What do we do next that's impactful, that might have some, we'll talk about legacy too, has some sustainability. What is really important that coincides with the brand, is synergistic with the brand, that we could call our own? So it really, the why is, in my mind, the most important thing, because it is, you can sit and we can continue to do what we're doing, but why? Why continue to do that? Can't we do more? So this was a natural evolution.
And so as we were working with Brooks Brothers in the very beginning, and one of the things that we look at with brands is we have to look at where they stand, and are they ready for this, and are they prepared? In many cases, we look at feasibility, we perform an audit from an internal standpoint. So with Brooks Brothers, you have an obvious leader in the fashion industry. It's distinctive, it's iconic, it's classic. Most people, if not all people, know the brand in general, and of course it's been known as a very authentic brand in the past, and kind of encompasses all of those values of who we are, particularly as a nation. And then, of course, they've been successful with the cause engagement. As Emilie mentioned, and I talked about earlier, Make-A-Wish, St. Jude, they've had those philanthropic efforts that have paid off and have worked well. And so this is one of the first things that we really try to look at is a brand prepared? Are they ready? And is it realistic that they can then move into developing a social impact platform, and are they going to be able to handle it? We'll talk a little more in just a minute about resources and some internal, some internal questions. When Emilie and I embarked on this, probably our biggest challenge was internal education. So she got it, which was wonderful, but we had a lot of people that we had to make sure were getting this, and that spanned from all the way from HR and accounting to legal to retail to marketing, and of course to the C-suite. But maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what it took, and then also kind of the big looming questions of that came out of that.
Well, it also depends on who you're talking to within the organization, right? So within a for-profit, we still have the same functionalities that some of the nonprofits do, but obviously you have to know who your audience is, and you have to speak to them about what that's important to them. So the CFO is going to ask me, what are we going to get for our investment? How are you going to measure impact? So he's going to go straight to black and white. And then maybe the person, our head of HR, is going to be, well, what does this mean for our associates? What is this going to do for engagement? How are we going to integrate this into the culture of the organization? And as Phil said, we had a lot of these factors already in place within the company, which was really wonderful. We had tremendous employee engagement across the organization throughout North America and also international, which is huge. So that was something very, very powerful. And we had a track record. In all of the causes that we work with, we were able to track the impact, right? And I make it it's sort of my business to inform and educate. So I'm always communicating internally and also to our customers exactly where their money goes and where our money goes. So it's not a big surprise. It is, you just have to know who you're talking to. And sometimes it goes even a little bit deeper. Some of the the challenges you get from some of the folks is, especially if you're trying to do this without any history, that's a separate conversation, because that really requires the piece that makes my job really easy, in a way, is the fact that this is supported by our chairman, CEO, and the owner of our company, who I fortunately get to report to. So he's extraordinarily philanthropic in his own right. So he gets this, and he wants to have our employees be able to have a chance to give back. In fact, I'll just tell you something really funny with Make-A-Wish, for example, or any of the charities that come in, they want to see us, they want to thank us, and we love that. But we end up thanking them, and he's the first one to do that. And I remember one of the guys said, well, why are you thanking me? And he said, well, because you're giving us the opportunity to make a difference. And I think that that's pretty unusual for somebody that is the owner of an organization as big as ours.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think, too, it's important to note that Brooks Brothers is private. So that can have many pros to it, but also it can be much more challenging. We talked a little bit about that because I think that sometimes people think that, with a public brand, with a public company, it must be much more challenging because of the stakeholder issues. In reality, sometimes you can run into even greater obstacles from a private sector standpoint, from a private company standpoint.
Well, the private sector, for sure. I mean, if you're privately held, I don't know if any of you are with organizations that are, there are some really good points, especially being in retail. If anybody has been up to date with what's going on in the retail sector right now, you know that it's very, very challenging. But the one thing is you don't have to answer to a board of directors, right? Because you answer to the executive team. So you have the luxury of being able to get things through, projects through, sometimes a lot faster than you would normally have the opportunity to do so. There's not a lot of layers that I have to go through in order to get an approval or just sign off on something that we want to do. But then on the other hand, then when in terms of resource restrictions, that's when, whether it's people or financial, whatever it might be, they tend to be a little bit bigger sort of spotlight on those. And we have to, I kind of call myself the queen of leveraging. You don't want anything to get in the way of what you want to do. And you have to hold tight onto that. If you don't have the personal resources within your own immediate world to do something, you've got to think outside the box. You've got to think about, how am I going to get this accomplished? And who can help me do that? Is it a partner inside? Is it a partner outside? And it's kind of where we've evolved now, too, with discussing this platform, that it may be a case of having to leverage, partnerships external to our organization. I love to say that I have a staff of 3, me, myself, and I. So, so when one of them doesn't show up, I'm in big trouble. But it just you have to be creative. You have to know your company, and you have to know how to maneuver within it.
So let's talk a little bit about, as we went through the process, and once we did get that buy-in, really what we said, okay, here's what we need to achieve. Here's what we must achieve as a brand, as a company. Why don't you talk about some of those areas that we knew we had to accomplish by creating this initiative?
Well, I would say the first thing we had to accomplish was identifying what it was. Right? So we had the idea that, I think for all the right reasons for us, we started, and maybe if I give a little background for everybody to sort of get familiar with, that we started the Golden Fleece Foundation back in 2007. And we did that as a sort of pass-through private charity. And eventually, it has grown, and it's still private to this day, knowing that we would probably have to blow it out to be public at some point when we continued on with the platform approach. But what we wanted to do was try, at this point in time, after how many, 11 years, what can we do with this? What does it mean? And so I started to sort of toss around in my head the idea that it was time for us to talk about legacy, and it was time for us to talk about sustainability, but more importantly, as you've heard in the previous conversations, it was time to put a stake in the ground. We've done some great work cause marketing-wise. We were not interested, and still are not today, in increasing the causes that we support. We feel like we have enough on our plate. We'd like to do few things really great rather than do a lot of things and, you know, dilute the impact. So this was the next sort of generation, and it was really about, well, what makes sense for the brand? What really is important to us? What do we want to, once we all retire and go off into the sunset, what do we really want to see that would continue on for this brand? Because it's 200 years old, and our goal with the group that we're in now today, running the organization, we want it to live another 200 years. So what do we have to do? So that was a very serious conversation with the executive team in really trying to identify with Phil, you know, what is it that makes sense? And I think we can talk a little bit about that and about the American Dream. And I don't mind sharing it at all. I think it's
let's save it for a surprise in just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do
So
it.
that was the biggest thing that we needed to determine what we were going to stand for, and we needed to own it. Nobody else could own it. And I always give it the aha test. You have to say, if somebody asks you at a cocktail party, what do you do? And you tell them, and you want it, or you have a proposal that you want to pitch. You want, just like we just saw, you want to be able to say it in few words and be able to have somebody say, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense for Brooks Brothers, right? So that was critical. We wanted to have something that was ahead of everybody else, that no one else was really doing at the time. And we obviously wanted to be a catalyst for a legacy platform, as I mentioned, that would live for a very long time into the future. Everything that we had to do had to be measurable so that our CFO would totally understand that. And as well as, by the way, that's not the only reason. One of the things that we do also is we give that knowledge to our associates. So they are our mouthpieces at the store, on the floor, with their customers, so that they can tell our customers exactly what's going on and how important it is for them to help support us as well. So I think that kind of covers it. A lot of questions to answer at that level, and then a whole other set of questions to ask when you start getting tactical.
Absolutely. So we won't spend a tremendous amount of time here, but quickly, what we did is we went through this feasibility and opportunity audit and assessment. And so as you look at this, we're looking at everything from competition to trends in the market to the resources, the me, myself, and I department, as well as financially. As Emilie mentioned, in retail in general, not just for Brooks Brothers, but retail is challenged right now. And so we had to really be realistic about what does this mean and what does giving back mean. So it has to mean far more, as the panel earlier was talking about, far more than finances. We have to look at unique ways of contributing and giving back. Of course, looking at the brand assets, making certain that we are on brand, that this is, no pun intended with it being Brooks Brothers, but that it is woven into the brand, and it is a core part of it. But you can kind of see some of those areas that we looked at, we evaluated, we investigated, we went deeper to determine that feasibility and then move into our next steps. So as what we want to do is we want to shift just a little bit to a conversation about, as Emilie kind of alluded to, where did we land and what does that look like? So we had to really think about what is the cause? What is the cause going to be? So the market is somewhat crowded. So Brooks Brothers, it sits within an interesting dynamic of retail, in that in some ways it can be considered luxury. In other ways, as retail is going, there's so much that's available, from Target to Macy's to Brooks Brothers to J. Crew to going into Ralph Lauren, what have you. There are a lot of competitors who are out there. What we did see, though, is that the majority of the competitors in the space are still not necessarily developing creating these social impact platforms, but rather they have cause marketing campaigns and programs with wonderful nonprofits that they're rolling out. But they're not necessarily putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is who we are and this is what we're standing for and this is what everything will be built on and built around. So with that, what we did is we went through a series of questions, and this is kind of the litmus test, and as we were really starting to look at what can the cause be. These next three, we're actually going to just walk you through these three areas of asking questions around cause. I think that as a nonprofit, these become critical questions for you to actually answer for yourself before you're walking in the door of a corporation or a brand and pitching them and telling them why you fit into their platform or align with where they have developed their social impact. So I think that all of these can be critical from that standpoint. So as we were looking at it, we said to ourselves, is the cause that we're championing distinctive? Is it something that really stands out? Can we claim it more so than any other brand who is out there, which can be a real challenge? And then can it become synonymous with the brand? So that's one piece to look at. Will the consumer accept the cause? There's quite a bit of consumer loyalty at Brooks Brothers. Fair statement?
Very fair.
Yeah.
Had customers for 50, 60 years.
Exactly.
It's generational.
And I was going to say, this...
Committed to the brand, not the cause that you stand for, not like St. Jude or the...
They are now committed, many are committed to the cause. Okay. The causes we stand for, but he's talking brand right now.
Yeah, I'm talking about their brand right now. So as we look at the type of customer that they have, this must be extremely authentic, and it must really be a perfect match in order for their customer to say, okay, this is real, because their customer has been with them for many, many years. So those are pieces that we had to look at. And again, I think this is great for you as nonprofits to look at and answer these questions as you're going in. And then, is there core business alignment? So is this going to align with what we do day in and day out? Is it tied to our business purpose? We talked a little bit about core values, which Brooks Brothers has. Not every brand and not every corporation actually has core values that they state, and they say these are our core values. If they do, you need to make sure that you're very attuned to those and you're looking at those. But from a brand standpoint, when we're working with brands, if they don't have those, it's one of the first places that we try to start with them before we even go through this entire process, because core values are key to the day-to-day. So as we went through that, we then looked at where the various impact areas that we could consider here. And Emily, maybe you can talk a little bit about, a lot of these were taken from what Brooks Brothers has done in the past.
That's a great segue, because all the time that we've been talking, I'm thinking to myself that, one of the things that we did that was sort of an aha moment for us was, well, let's go back to what we've done, is look at our history and where have we seen those moments or those things that we do that have made everybody feel great? Is that feel good? Is that we can actually see ourselves in past history? And frankly, there are a number of those, but it all sort of boils down to making someone gain confidence and self-esteem by getting them outfitted in a Brooks Brothers suit. It could be a Brooks Brothers blazer and khakis, but it's generally for your first job interview. You might be going off to college. You need a suit, whatever that is. And we started to share stories, and we talked about stories, and they are critical to this world. They are critical to being able to communicate very quickly and very easily what you're all about and what you're trying to do, because it really tells the whole scope of everything that you're attempting to accomplish. So our stories are about, for example, and I don't mind sharing a few with you because I think they're important. Our story is about the veteran that we happened to dress after he got home from Iraq, who had only known a uniform, an Army uniform. He comes home, and you've read the stats on our vets, and it's not a pretty sight. And they're in very dire straits, many of them. So we have a very small charity that we associate with called Dignity You Wear, and their suits for soldiers. When we outfitted him in a Brooks Brothers suit, he had tears in his eyes. And he said, I finally feel like me again. When he had to turn in his uniform, his military uniform, it was as if they took his essence away. And now he had it back. And you could see it in every fiber of his being, the way he stood up, the way he walked around the room, and he was off and ready, going to get another job and integrating back into society in a positive way. There's the many stories about the kids in school that are financially challenged. So there's that divide between where they are in life and in financial support. They have the brains and they have the know-how, but they can't cross that bridge. And so it's working with kids across the country to outfit them in clothing that helps them move and feel better about themselves and move further ahead, whether it's in school or onto their career. So we have thousands of these stories across the organization, and we just looked at that very seriously and said, well, what is the common link here? What's the common thread? So each of these people have a desire to do better, to improve their lives, and that's where Brooks Brothers can help them accomplish that particular personal goal.
Yeah, and a few of the others too that we looked at and what we had to make sure that we were aware of is, of course, children's health, with Make-A-Wish and St. Jude being at the forefront. So how does that factor in? What does that look like? And we'll tell you about that in just a second. And then also, the Brooks Brothers team is constantly out speaking, training, talking to others about personal branding and about how to present yourself when it comes to career choices and in career situations. And then also, one thing that Brooks Brothers does such a wonderful job of is kind of taking care of their own. So many times we always think of fashion as the front of house or the fashion design and all. We don't necessarily think about tailoring and so many other pieces and parts that go into this. And so all of that needed to become part of this as well. And so taking all of that into account, here's really where we've landed, and I want to say something about what we're showing you today. What we're showing you is we're joining you and kind of lifting or opening the curtain a bit for you to say that you're actually seeing this in progress. So we're not here today to unveil some beautiful theme that then has a wonderful design with it, and we're going to show you the advertising, the marketing, and the whole 9 yards. We're showing you very raw where we have landed from a conceptual standpoint, in hopes that then you will continue to follow this journey with us, and you'll be able to see how this all comes to life. But with that said, as we looked at everything, we realized that everything did indeed have that common thread. And Emily, maybe you can talk a little more about kind of where it was, I guess, yeah, about where we've landed with this.
So just think about the American dream, and that's really what the essence is of our platform. And it really came out of sitting with the executive team, hashing out some of these ideas that we had and talking about all of these stories and some of the experiences that we've had with other causes and the impact that things have had along the way. And it actually was our president of international, she said, it really has to do, we're about outfitting presidents. We've outfitted every president, except for maybe 3 or 4. We've outfitted CEOs and chairmen of the board, and we've done actors, and we've done all kinds of dignitaries throughout the world. And we just are known for that. And she's like, but part of it is just simply allowing someone to sort of achieve what we call the American dream. And then there was a whole conversation is how relevant is that today in today's world? Well, it's still relevant. You still hear it being used in the media today. And it really started to resonate with everybody around, because then everybody had a story. Everybody said, well, you're right. So we have, for example, in our flagship store at 346 Madison at 44th Street, up on the 5th floor, we have the mirror that Abraham Lincoln was actually fitted in his overcoat that he wore for his inauguration. Sadly, it was also the coat that he was assassinated in. But it's that kind of history that belongs to us. It doesn't belong to anybody else. And, you think about what it must have been like, to be part of that era and achieve something in history that was never achieved previously. So it's different for everybody, but quite frankly, it really comes down to enabling someone to fulfill their dream by virtue of the fact that maybe a suit, a lending hand, an opportunity like that will help them get to that next level. So whatever their dream is, we want to be there to try to make that happen.
Yes, I couldn't say that any better. And I think that some people may ask about children's health, and the reality is that we're trying then to bring along the next generation. And so that's really what we're looking at too from the children's health perspective, is that there are dreams there as well. And so this is our next generation that we're moving through. So real quick, I know that we're out of time. Where are we now? So we've landed on the cause area. We're in the process now of really looking at partnerships and developing those. And then of course, thematically really determining what this will look like and how it will play out. So I know that we're limited, and I'm going to cut it short. But Emilie, I would just say to you, what are your kind of parting words for brands and for nonprofits as they're looking at this whole social impact platform push?
Take your time with it. Know your organization. Know what your culture is, obviously, and who's driving it within your organization. Because as I said, you have to have the support of the CEO or the executives in the C-suite, because without that, you're sort of shoveling against the tide. I think it's important that you don't give up. I said earlier, I'm the queen of leveraging. I think that depending on the resources you have, you can move, or you could allow something to get in the way of your progression, but don't let that happen. Just continue to look outside, inside, outside, wherever you can to help further the cause. And I have also learned along the way that when you actually try to force something to happen, it doesn't work. It never works. So I do still say look at your heart, but I do agree that you have to, in this case, you have to look at every single thing, which is why this is such a multi-layered approach to an end, and that we can't wait to finally figure out just exactly who and what and when and how we're going to be able to accomplish this. So just take your time. It doesn't have to happen immediately, but take your time. It's a big step.
Thank you for that, and thank you all very much. And Jennifer, I know that we're probably out of time, so